The Orville. Those of you who have been watching me for a while know that I've had pretty positive opinions of this science fiction show ever since its launch in 2017, but I have also repeatedly criticized it for its lack of ambition, scale, and scope, as the show consistently undermined itself by insisting it was nothing more than a Star Trek parody, when in reality, it's much better Star Trek than, well, Star Trek is. It certainly beats the ever-living shit out of Picard and STD, that's for certain. And so it is with great pleasure that I can announce that, tonally, Season 3 is drastically different from 1 and 2. No longer is the show content to be a mere parody of something else. Finally, it has created a universe of its own. It has become the Orville rather than that other Star Trek show. And this is made immediately obvious as the opening scene is of an enormous life or death space battle. Now, I'm going to try and keep this quote-unquote review relatively spoiler-free, but as this is, Season 3, there are some things that are somewhat inevitable. Like, for example, that the evil killer space robots turned out to be evil killer space robots. Shocker, I know, but anywho, this opening space battle does turn out to have been just a dream, and I have gotta say, I am half disappointed they didn't just roll with this, but nevertheless, it sets the stage for a very, very different Orville, and thank gods for that, because whilst the previous two seasons were good, don't get me wrong, the best parts of the series were the thought-provoking parts, which were all too often sabotaged by what I would be extremely charitable to call humor. Seth MacFarlane, the show's creator and one of the leading actors, considers himself to be a rather funny guy. I disagree. Vehemently so. Luckily, the number of jokes in episode 1 can be counted on the fingers of one hand, a trend that continues throughout the season, much to the show's advantage in my none too humble opinion, and instead focuses on character and world building, introducing, for example, Ensign Charlie Burke here. When the Kaylon attacked at the end of the last season, her ship was destroyed and a lot of the people aboard were killed. Therefore, she is not at all fond of Kaylons, and she is not particularly happy with the fact that one of the Kaylons, Isaac, is still aboard the Orville, after having had his own change of heart at the end of the previous season. Her character is a really great little touch to actually demonstrate that, you know, they are in a war here. Lots of people died when the Kaylons attacked, and obviously they're not going to be willing to just forgive and forget all of that. And this is something that so few shows not even does well, but even remembers. Whenever an evil character gets a redemption episode, everybody just kind of forgets all about it. Or the worst case scenario, they mention it to them once, like, hey, do you remember when you were a genocidal maniac? Ha 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 ha, wasn't that a funny thing, eh? Whereas here, Isaac is exposed to, well, bullying, and fairly cold-hearted bullying as well, which he doesn't even notice because, well, he's a cold, dead, soulless robot, but still, the point is well thought out and well delivered. Plus, I gotta say, this is how you write a gay character, because Ensign Burke just so happens to be gay, or at the very least bi, and that's the beauty of it. It is not brought up frequently, it is not mentioned again and again. In fact, I think it's mentioned precisely once in the entire season, and she never makes a big deal out of it. She just happens to have been in love with another woman, and that's it. Her sexuality is not her character, it is not her primary feature, it just so happens to be a part of who she is. And that is exactly how it should be. It is simply something normal. It is not exceptional, it isn't weird, it isn't strange. It is just something that is. A lot of shows could learn a lot of lessons from this positive representation of a gay character, where the focus is on the character rather than who she would like to sleep with. And on that note, this is far from the only, I hate to say it, controversial point that the Orville touches upon. In fact, one of the really brave episodes addresses the idea of transitioning children. There's a tragically spicy topic in this day and age. So there's a little bit of backstory here. The child, Topa, belongs to a race called the Mocklans. They are introduced as a unisex species that only have males, but this turns out to not be entirely correct, as the females are all transitioned at birth to be males, due solely to the societal pressure that this is how it should be. I am sweating already. Topa, however, he is starting to think that there is something wrong with him. He has weird emotions that he can't quite square away. He feels like there's something off, that he doesn't belong in his own body. He lacks purpose. He has a void inside him that he is trying to fill in various ways. It is an interesting reversal of the usual modern-day talking point of we must transition children because they want to be the other gender and disallowing it causes them harm. Okay, well, let's also entertain the notion that maybe, just maybe, YouTube children don't always know what they want. And if this, I admit, long-shot notion is correct, then maybe a child might regret the decision to permanently mutilate their genitalia because he once told the teacher he wanted to wear a pretty dress. If we accept this, then it opens the possibility that post-transition, the child may no longer wish to wear the dress, because it wasn't the dress the child wanted, it was the attention granted to the other child when she received the dress. Because, children. And so might end up very unhappy because they are now in the wrong body. But the show doesn't even leave it there, because it also then further presents the story in the light of one of Topa's fathers, as his opinion on the matter is equally stark. He was born a female, and he wished he was never told that he was born a female, as it has been a genuine and tremendous burden on him. He never wanted to be a female, unlike Topa. What the Orville presents here echoes my own opinions on the matter perfectly. If a grown adult, after having been fully informed of any and all dangers and consequences, etc., along with, say, a year-long consideration period with psychiatric help to ensure that this isn't a spur-of-the-moment thing, still decide to go through with it, then that's perfectly fine. It is their body and they may do with it as they want. But to transition a child, a person who is not even allowed to decide what to have for dinner yet, is blatant lunacy. If somebody is not old enough to drink yet, they are certainly not old enough to choose to undergo permanent, irreversible surgery on their body. Fortunately, in the utopian future of the Orville, it is not irreversible, but for us in the current year, this controversial take on a modern-day topic is very refreshing. The show even goes so far as to criticize feminism. Like I said, it addresses some spicy topics, but I think I've already delivered enough spoilers with the Topa part, but better you understand the full context of that one, because it is a genuinely rather brave thing to do, considering the current climate. Now, as for the quality of the questions asked, the Orville has had some hits and some misses over its time. In one of the previous seasons, for example, there was a society that was ruled over by a upvote and a downvote button, where everybody had a little thing on their shirt which had an upvote signal and a downvote signal. And you would give upvote and downvote to the person by pressing their buttons. You'd give an upvote, for example, for, a nice waiter, like, here's your meal, sir, like, thank you, beep, upvote. Or you would give them a downvote if they were rude to you, and so on. You can immediately begin to see the potential complications with this system, especially as cancel culture and dogpiling swiftly became a common part of their society, as they had essentially turned the internet into real life. Now, they briefly bring that up this season as well in another context, but it is an example of one of the more interesting societal commentaries that the show makes. Cancel culture can be pretty goddamn ridiculous, and if taken to the extreme, can literally ruin people's lives, as we have seen again and again over the course of our own recent internet history. But the show also takes up some kind of daft points as well. It tries to explain, for example, why it does not give advanced technology to beginning civilization, to like 21st century style civilizations. And the explanation is lacking in the extreme, very short-sighted, and is focused primarily on a pro-globalist point of view. I won't go too far into it, but essentially the show says that if you give a matter synthesizer, a replicator, to a developing civilization, they will try to hoard it for themselves and profit off it, which is stupid, because you could simply hand them as many matter synthesizers as you damn well pleased, and seeing as they can create quite literally anything out of anything, the entire concept of value simply ceases to exist. Oh, they're gonna profit off it, are they? How? By gaining more money? Well, there you go. I've synthesized a mountain of gold for you. Happy? Oil? We can make that. Water? Sure. It is not a very well thought through point, but these examples are the exception rather than the rule. There's another episode as well that could literally have been solved if they would just wear their goddamn space suits. Very Star Trek-y, I guess. But once more, it isn't even necessarily the point it presents that makes it so good. It is the overall finish, the polish, the attention to detail. The Orville starts out as kind of a space trucker style show where you're following just a humdrum, average run-of-the-mill ship. You're not following the Enterprise or anything. It's just a random boat somewhere doing random boat things. But over the course of its adventures, the Orville has become something more. Not because of divine decree, but because of the things it has gone through, the experiences it has had, and the bonds that the characters have created over the course of preceding seasons. The characters are also presented in a remarkably fluid view, showing that they can change their opinions and even entire personalities based upon how the world affects them. There is a very interesting one, including time travel, where a character basically flips their entire value system based on the situation into which they have been thrust. It is a very humanizing and natural feel to the episode, both touching and a little disturbing at the same time, as you realize that something terrible has been done, but it was also the right thing to do. And now that the show has moved beyond its infantile stage of constantly needing to take the piss out of its own characters, I expect that this will only continue to grow better. And to point out something else as well, in a show like, say for example, Strange New Worlds, which I still thought was a decent Trekian thing, particularly in comparison to STD, etc., one of the big problems with a lot of these shows, STD, Picard, Strange New Worlds, is that it assumes that you will simply accept it telling you that these characters are totally bonded, they're totally friends and stuff, and they totally hang out together all the time when they've got time off. They really care for one another, but you never actually get to see any of that. You just have to take their word for it. Whereas in the Orville, you constantly see the characters just hanging out, going on dates, being together, drinking together, having little parties together, singing together, fraternizing. It's weird how this really actually lends a great deal of depth to the characters because it humanizes them. It gives them multiple dimensions rather than simply being the main characters in a TV show. So, if you haven't watched The Orville already, I highly recommend you give it a go, and I would suggest you start from Season 2, at least. Maybe skip Season 1, but even that has some value to it, and will let you, experience the characters as they grow and build up, and actually develop their relationships with one another. Considering Episode 1 starts with Seth MacFarlane's character's wife cheating on him, it's... You'd lose a lot of context if you didn't. And hey, if you thought Family Guy was funny, 1, you're weird, and 2, you might actually find his humor tolerable. I don't. But, hey, not everyone can be me. For better or worse. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.